Hello, welcome to Animated Literacy. My name is Jim Stone and I'm the author and creator of the program. In the last sessions, we have been covering an overview and research of animated literacy through a series of 20 to 25 minute videotapes that represent what would normally be presented in a two-day workshop, like the ones that I've been presenting over the last 25 years as I've traveled across the United States and Canada. Beginning with this session, we're going to be walking through the 91 basic lesson plans that are included in the Story, Song, and Action book. These will align with any editions of the Story, Song, and Action book that have a copyright date of 2005 or later. They won't align with copyright dates earlier than that. And the reason for that is that I taught in a self-contained classroom from 1970 to 1996, and it was during that period that I developed the early editions of animated literacy. Beginning in 1996, I was receiving many requests to go on the road and present workshops, so I left the classroom and began traveling and presenting. Beginning in 1995, 1996, there was an explosion of research from brain research, language research, and reading research that came into print. So as I was traveling and presenting workshops, I was getting feedback from teachers, and I was reading that research and attending brain conferences and language conferences and reading conferences. So after being on the road for about 6 or 7 years, I decided I really needed to go back to the classroom to see what impact that research could have on my teaching. So I went back and taught a full year of kindergarten where I got to apply that research, and the results of that were incredible. I came away believing that teachers have a great impact on the intelligence of their students. If we understand how the brain processes and remembers information, and we understand the natural sequence that children all over the world go through in every language when they're acquiring language, and we understand the critical elements that need to be taught for reading research, children look incredibly intelligent. If we teach in a manner that does not follow that natural progression, and their brains can't process the way that we are presenting material, they can look far less successful. So after going back to the classroom and applying that research, I went back and rewrote the entire handbook. So that's why the lesson plans that appear in the current edition of the Story, Song, and Action book are different from the ones that appeared before 2005. So beginning with the 2005 edition, it has 96 basic lesson plans followed by 96 review lessons. And it has been updated since then. So the edition that I'm working from here is the 2015 edition, which is our most recent edition of that handbook. If you would like information on our materials, you can go to our website, animatedliteracy.com, and you can get ordering information from there if you're in the United States, or if you're in Canada, you can view our website and then you can contact Bonnie Chappell at her email here at the bottom, and she'll be glad to help you with materials. Or you can simply view the videotapes and you can create your own materials from the videotapes and teach the program. This is a highly comprehensive program that will guide children from anywhere they are, from the earliest stages of literacy instruction up to fluency and independence in reading and writing, if you follow all of the lesson plans and you apply the research that I've been discussing in the overview and history of animated literacy. So with that, we're going to begin by introducing lesson number 1. The purpose of lesson number 1 is to provide a very fast way of introducing the gestures and sounds and characters that are taught in animated literacy. And this is a really important thing to do, especially if you're in a classroom that has a broad range of abilities and backgrounds with your students. All of the years except one that I taught animated literacy were in very low-income schools. Then when I went back after reading all of the research, I was in a high-income school, but we bused children in from low-income areas. So I got to teach it with a range of children who had been read to since before birth or shortly after birth, as well as working with students who didn't speak any English and students who came from poverty homes. And what the research predicted and came out of that is that all of these children progressed in a similar sequence of stages and milestones. But some of those children who were more prepared progressed at a much faster rate and with much less assistance, while the children who didn't come from a home where they were read to and didn't have all of those rich language experiences went through the same sequence of instruction, but at a much slower rate and with a lot more assistance. So the variable is not the sequence that children learn in, but the time frame and the level of assistance that is necessary. So by bringing these children in and using the lesson plan that we're going to be applying here, I could expose children within just a matter of 2 or 3 weeks to all of the sounds necessary to read and write successfully. So my students who came in with rich language backgrounds were able to fly. Those kids were beginning to read chapter books by November, December of kindergarten, whereas the children who needed more time and more assistance were traveling the same path that they traveled, but needed more time and more help to accomplish that. So animated literacy, all of the gestures and the characters that I'm going to be working with, if you go back to the overview and research to part 6, you'll have all of the gestures and characters for the vowel sounds. And if you go to part 7, you'll have all the characters and gestures for all of the consonant sounds. And then if you look at part 8, you'll have all of the activities and pattern songs that we use for manipulating sounds. So what we're going to do in this lesson is we're going to go to the old song Frere Jacques, and we're going to use this as a context for rapidly introducing all of those gestures and sounds that are needed to read and write successfully. So we're going to follow our basic lesson plan. And the first thing that I do in every lesson is say to my class, boys and girls, we have a lot of new information to learn. If we're going to remember and understand any of that information, we have to glue the new things that I'm teaching you to the old things that are already stored in your brain. So our first step is we're going to talk about things that we already know. So I ask my kids to raise their hands to respond to some questions about sleeping. How many of you slept last night? How many of you slept standing up? How many of you slept lying down? How many of you slept in a bed? How many of you slept on the floor? How many of you slept with your eyes open? How many of you slept with your eyes closed? How many of you woke up this morning? What woke you up today? Was it a bell? Was it someone coming and waking you up? Then you can have your kids get together with a partner and talk about these experiences. Then we can go in and actually sing Frere Jacques. And this is a wonderful song to use because we can do it in the language of every child in the classroom. And so here are 3 versions of Frere Jacques, one in English, one in French, and one in Spanish. And when the children hear it in their home language, they feel much more welcomed into the classroom and they feel much more a part of things. And that kind of emotion will lead to a lot more success in reading and writing. After we have talked about prior knowledge in every lesson, we're going to read books that build on that prior knowledge. And we're going to be reading a combination of nonfiction expository text and fiction narrative text. This is an example of an expository text that we might start with. And it's been shown in research that teachers tend to not use a lot of expository text. But as children are getting into reading to acquire knowledge in the later grades, they have to know how to process expository text. So when I'm using expository text, I do it just like an adult. You may pick out a book that is informational and not read the entire book. You might look at the table of contents and then look at the appendix and simply turn to the page that you want. So when I'm reading expository text, I may read only a page or 2 and then put that book away. But when I'm reading narrative text, narrative has a beginning, a middle, and an end, so we want to know how it ends. So a narrative, I'm going to read the entire book. So here's an example of how I might read this book, which is from Paul Showers, and it's called Sleep is for Everyone. Now, as I'm reading it, I want my children to join in by gesturing. And we've talked about the critical importance of gesturing and of copying. So I'm going to read one phrase at a time. And as I read that phrase, if there's a picture in the book that matches the noun that I'm reading, I'm going to point to the picture. So if the text says horse, I'll point to the horse. And I want my children to repeat after me. And I want them to point to the horse. So the first one would read like this. When a horse goes to sleep, so I'll go along, go when a horse, and now the children repeat back, when a horse goes to sleep. So now when I come to a verb, I'm going to gesture that verb, and I want the children to repeat back to me. So I go, oh, I like the way you're repeating my words and you're copying my gestures or movements. So let's do that again. When a horse, and they repeat back, when a horse goes to sleep, its eyelids go down. Its eyelids go down. Now on the next page it says when a chicken, so they repeat back, when a chicken goes to sleep, its eyelids go up. Now we have a snake. When a snake goes to sleep, its eyelids stay open. Snakes have no eyelids. Now we've learned some facts about some animals, and we can move on to another book, or we could continue and read a bit more of that. Napping House is one of my favorite books for leading into Frere Jacques, and it has wonderful language in it that sounds like this. There is a house, a napping house, where everyone is sleeping. And in that house, there is a bed, a cozy bed, in a napping house where everyone is sleeping. So it's real easy for kids to echo that back and to repeat the words and point to the pictures. This is also an easy one to move to our second level of Vygotsky, where his first level scaffolding is to simply copy. His next level is where I start the sentence and the children complete it for me. And this book is very easy to model that process. So now we have set the context for Frere Jacques by accessing prior knowledge, by discussing that prior knowledge, by reading books related to that. So now we're ready to sing the song. So as we're singing Frere Jacques, we're going to put in our gestures again. So repeat this back to me. Are you sleeping? Are you sleeping? Brother John, Brother John. Morning bells are ringing, ding dong ding, ding dong ding. Now I tell my children, we're going to give each of you a special gesture and a special bell sound to put into Frere Jacques. So now we've talked about that oo, e, and ah are the very first sounds that every child produces all around the world. They start with vowels, not with consonants. So if I have a child that begins with one of those sounds, like Oscar, I might invite Oscar up to the front of the classroom first. And then I can say to Oscar, Oscar, your name starts just like Dr. Olly Ostrich. And if you go to see Dr. Olly Ostrich with a sore throat, he's going to take out that stick. He's going to ask you to open wide, and what is he going to ask you to say? Ah! So that's our sound for Dr. Olly Ostrich. Now we're going to go from the part back to the whole by placing it into the context of Frere Jacques. So sing this back to me. Are you at the doctor's? Are you at the doctor's? Brother Olly, Brother Oscar. Oscar's bells are saying, Oscar's bells are saying, ah, 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 ah. What's our sound for Oscar? Ah. So now we can move on to another child. And so the next child we're going to go to is Ernie. And I can hold up our picture of Irving, whirling Irving, and tell the children that here's Irving, and he's on his scooter, and he's going around in circles really fast. And if you take a hold of the steering wheel of that scooter and you turn it real quickly, what are the tires going to say? So that's Ernie's sound. So let's put Ernie into our song, and it's going to sound like this. Are you turning, Brother Ernie, Brother Ernie? Ernie's bells are saying, Ernie's bells are saying, So what's our sound for Ernie? What's our sound for Oscar? Ah. So we go back and repeat those to reinforce them before moving on to the next child. So now we're going to move on to Amy. Now here we've changed to a girl, but I'm going to purposefully leave an old word that will cause a conflict. Because one of the critical components of comprehension for children is being able to find mismatches, and it's been found that good readers find the mismatches and poor readers don't. So now I want children to basically tattle, and this will stimulate their emotions, because there's nothing more emotionally rewarding to children than being able to correct the teacher or an adult. So they're going to be on the edge of their seats once they know that tattling is okay in this context, waiting for me to make a mistake so that they can correct me. So here's Abe, and his name starts just like Amy. And here he has on skates, and he's skating down the hill to the bay. So everybody show me the wheel of a skate like this. Put yourself on top of that skate. And as you go down the hill, I want you to make Amy and Abe sound. Go, hey! Now if we put that into Frere Jacques, our verse is going to sound like this. Are you skating, brother Amy, brother Amy? And the kids are going, oh, Mr. Stone, there's a problem. Well, what's the matter? Well, Amy's a girl, she's not a boy. So now they're comprehending, correcting me. So if she's a girl, we can't call her a brother. What would we need to call her? A sister. Well, let's try that. Are you skating, sister Amy, Amy's bells are saying, A. So just like we talked about in part 6 of the overview and research, when babies produce vowels, they do them one at a time, and they isolate their vowels. But now we're going to move from vowels into consonants. And we talked about the critical thing that happens when children begin to babble and they begin to add consonants to the sounds that they produce. They start to produce vowels at about 2 to 4 months old. They produce them for several months with no consonants. And then at about 6, 7, 8 months old, they start to produce their consonant sounds. But they take that consonant and they put it in front of a vowel to produce things like goo-goo, and then if they change goo-goo to boo-boo, then they've changed the consonant. If they change boo-boo to ba-ba, they've changed the vowel. So we're going to do something very natural and similar to that. Mikey comes up to the front of the classroom, and I go, oh, Mikey, your name starts just like Mimi Mermaid. And so here's a picture of Mimi Mermaid, and she has this magic mop. So when the monsters are marching down Mammoth Mountain to munch on her minnow friends, she puts down her mandolin, picks up her magic mop, moves it back and forth, and goes, mmm. And when the monsters hear that sound, they melt into harmless mice, scamper back up the mountain, and she goes back to playing merry music on her mandolin. So when you think of Mimi Mermaid, or you think of Mikey, think of the sound at the beginning of their name and go, mmm. Now when we put that into Frere Jacques, we're not going to go the way we would if it were a vowel. Instead, we're going to copy what babies do when they're babbling. So we're going to take the ing and ong and treat it like the ah and oo, and we're going to take away the d in front of the ing and ong and replace it with the consonant sound that the child's name begins with. So Mikey's verse will sing like this. Are you moving a magic mop? Are you moving a magic mop? Brother Mikey, Mikey's bells are saying, ming mong ming, ming mong ming. Now if we move to Shawn, Shawn's name starts with an S, but we don't hear the sound of S when we look at Shawn. And so when we're doing this activity, we don't care what the letter is. We care what the sound is. So I tell the children that Shawn's name begins like Sheriff Shadrach. And Sheriff Shadrach can shampoo in the shower. He can shave in the shower. He can shine his shoes in the shower. So we could use any of those gestures for gesturing his sound. So I'm going to use shaving, but if you want to use one of the other gestures, you can. So now Shawn's verse is going to sound like this. Are you shaving? Are you shaving? Brother Shawn, Shawn's bells are saying, shing shong shing, shing shong shing. Now if we go to Tricia, Tricia begins with 2 consonants. So we have a choice here. We could do it just with the T, or we could use both the T and the R. And so you can decide which is more appropriate for the level of your students. So let's say we're going to do it with a T and R. Well, Tricia, your name begins with both the sound of Timmy Tiger tickling and the sound of Rosie Raccoon riding. So if we put those two sounds together, we have tra. So show me tickling and then riding, and we can sing Tricia's verse this way. Are you tickling and riding? Are you tickling and riding? Brother Tricia. And now they correct me. No, it's Sister Tricia. Are you tickling and riding? Are you tickling and riding? Sister Tricia. Sister Tricia. Tricia's bells are saying. Tricia's bells are saying. Tring, trong, tring. Tring, trong, tring. And now my kids would be tickling with one hand and riding with the other hand to show me the sounds of T and R. So now we will go through all of the names of the children in the classroom. If we can do them all in one lesson, that's great. If we need to do part of them in one lesson and then pick up the next day, review the previous day, and expand it to the next lesson, then we can certainly do that. So now we're going to go to the next step, where we're going to use a pattern song to put our sounds back into context. So here I can give the children a frame like this. Now, if I were doing this in kindergarten on the first day of school, my children would not be able to do this independently. If I were doing it in first grade, they may be able to do it independently. If I'm doing this in kindergarten, I may not go to this at all, because the most important thing in kindergarten is listening comprehension and phonological awareness. So I may simply do the pieces that have led up to this and stop before going to this. But if your preschoolers are ready for this, you can certainly go ahead and do that. So now what we're going to do, if I'm doing this in kindergarten, before I give the child their paper, I'm going to have written some of the words. So here I've already written Emma, or sister, and I've already written Emma. Then I wrote Emma again down here. Now what we're doing is we want to generate our picture from the text, because this is what you have to do in 3rd and 4th grade. When the pictures are missing, you have to create them in your mind. Here we're going to create them on our paper. So we talk about where you slept last night, and how you can draw a picture of that. And so now the children take and they rainbow write over the words that I've written by taking each color of crayon and tracing over the top. And then they draw their picture of themselves sleeping. And as they're doing that, I go around behind each child and I write in what the bell tones say. Now, depending on the level of your kids, you can just leave it like that, or you can have them come back and rainbow write over the bell tones, or you could write them 3 times, and the children could rainbow write and then write them 3 times over here. Then, as I'm doing that, I ask the children to tell me something about their picture. And so when I asked Emma to tell me about her picture, she said, "My bed is soft." So I take that dictation and I write that sentence on the child's paper, and then they take out a pencil, they trace over the top, or they can copy it underneath, so they have a choice. And then the end of the day, I go to each child and say, "Can you read to me what that says? Do you remember?" And usually, because it's personal about them, they remember that. So here's an example of Michael's page, and he has drawn a picture. And when I asked him about his picture, he said, "I like my bed." So I wrote that, and he traced over the top. And as I said, he could have copied it underneath. Here's Madison's page from the first day of kindergarten, and she's drawn her picture of how she sleeps. And when I asked her, she said, "My bed is big." And so I wrote that, and she traced over the top of that. So that's kind of leading in to what we'll be doing for our early writing. And here's Mike's page, and he covered the entire top of the page up here. So when I wrote his sentence and he traced over the top, I did it on the back of the page. Now, if you're doing this with a more advanced group, there's a frame that looks like this in the handbook. And on this one, the child can, instead of sleeping, they can write in the verb that represents their sound. So if this were Tom, he'd be writing here, "Are you tickling, are you tickling, brother Tom, brother Tom, Tom's bells are saying." But now when you get down to here, if you want to leave it bells, you can, But if you want to change it to animals and their sound, you can treat their sounds just like you do the bell tones. And this is talked about in segment 8, where I go into more detail on rewriting this pattern. So Tom might choose to do it this way. Tom's cats are saying, now if a cat says meow, Tom's cat would say teow, and so he'd write, Tom's cats are saying teow, teow, teow. If it was a bee, he might go, Tom's bees are saying, now a bee goes buzz, so Tom's bees would go tuzz. Tom's bees are saying tuzz, tuzz, tuzz. Now when we have finished completing those, we can take and put them into a book, bind it by stapling it, and put it into the classroom library. Or if you're doing this at home with your children at homeschooling, you can put it up on the refrigerator or on the child's wall or somewhere where they can go back and read it over and over and over again. So our next section, we're going to be spending an entire lesson on Polly Panda and teaching Polly Panda's complete story and her song for the Sound of Peace. So thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you in lesson number 2.